They're monopolies. If you break up Facebook, is that actually going to change Facebook's dominance? Is that actually going to solve the problem? If you are kicking people off, if you're modifying their content, if you are, suspending them unfairly, is that a violation of free speech? I think it is. These are monopolies by definition. Name of the book. Name of the show. The Facebook antitrust stuff. So lots of different stories on this, but there's basically two complaints here. There's a suit filed by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and then there's a suit filed by 48 different states and attorney generals. They are arguing a lot of the same things, that Facebook has abused its monopoly positioning, particularly in acquiring Instagram and WhatsApp for $1 billion each, roughly. And that, they use their positioning to be anti-competitive, to thwart other competitors, to somewhat bully these startups into getting acquired, and they need to be broken up. I would agree that content platforms and many of the large platform monopolies, particularly Facebook, Amazon, Google, and Apple, are absolutely monopolies. That is easy to prove if you have a skilled attorney and an informed litigator, which unfortunately many of these people don't fit that definition. These lawsuits, though, if you break up Facebook from WhatsApp and Instagram, is that actually going to change Facebook's dominance? Is that actually going to solve the problem? Number of top social platforms by active users in millions. You can see Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram versus Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, and Pinterest, right? So what they've been able to do is take their dominance and their network effects in the core platform business. Let's call that the social network of Facebook. And then you've been able to see them kind of now supercharge these adjacent platform businesses. WhatsApp really being a communication platform, Instagram being kind of more like a content platform, frankly. Social networks and content platforms can, share a lot of similarities. Facebook.com actually, I would say now exhibits both models. But Facebook earlier, if you actually probably back up more so to when they acquired Instagram, Facebook was really more of a social network than it was a content platform. The thing that really made Facebook become a content platform was when you started to have more of this kind of one-to-many relationship, right? Where businesses and other users could publish information to a myriad of different followers. And you kind of had that single opt-in model, that following model, versus the double opt-in, which is that friending model, right? That was really Facebook's original model. I mean, there still is that today where you have friends, but now you can have double opt-in where, I friend you, you accept, and single opt-in, which is the follow model. Follow model is really more regularly followed on Instagram, and Facebook still has the friending, kind of the double opt-in. You can be private on Instagram, and now, there's hybrid approaches to this kind of stuff. But I think you get the point. It's a combination of these three different businesses we talk a lot about on the show, this idea of platform conglomerates, where Uber has that with Uber Eats, Uber ride sharing was the core, and then they got Uber Eats. And now, fortunately for Uber, they've had Uber Eats really actually eclipse the volume in ride sharing just given COVID. That is a very critical point of evolution for these platform businesses on their journey to monopoly power, is when do you cross that chasm to not just have one platform business model, but multiple? Clearly, you look at any of those big four, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, they've got multiple platform businesses that stack on top of each other. And now, that is ultimately what these attorney generals are trying to get at. The challenge is, if you got over 2 billion users on Facebook, just.com, how do you solve that problem? And by splitting up these companies, does that actually solve the problems within each of these ecosystems? Certainly, Facebook has been able to use its platform conglomerate status to supercharge these other adjacent models in WhatsApp communication and Instagram content. And they're about to layer in commerce. right, with the customer acquisition they just made? And the answer is no. Splitting these things up won't solve the problems that exist within the platforms themselves. And each of these in and of themselves are now massive businesses. So does breaking them up, quote unquote, help in the sense of it weakens Facebook's position if you're able to somehow magically be successful and break these companies up? Yes, it does, because now they don't control 3, they would control 1 or 2. But at the same time, will you be successful in fighting this case for years to actually break these things up? And I think, you got to look at the merits of the case. I'm not a lawyer. I just know platforms pretty well. And I think that's an uphill battle. Waging the argument to go back and say, well, they shouldn't have been able to acquire this. And now, because they own these companies, because they own Instagram, because they own WhatsApp, that is making them disadvantage their users more. But how are they disadvantaging their users? That really should be at the crux of these cases. And when you look at that, the main way that platforms take advantage of users, as I'm a broken record on this show sometimes, is they take advantage of suppliers, of the creators in this case, right? We've talked about that. We had Tim Kendall on the show from early Facebook, first head of monetization and elsewhere. And there's two parts to this. There's the matchmaking and the algorithms that determine what content goes into your newsfeed. And then there's the curation, right? And what penalizing action do I take on users that post infringing content, right? And both of these things deserve a look by regulators and by the FTC to help regulate. If you think back to AT&T, right? AT&T was a government granted monopoly which had government oversight, right? It was a regulated monopoly, right? And one of the arguments that these lawyers, these different attorney generals and the FTC make is that, if you kick people off the platform, you are disadvantaging them. That's true. But again, by breaking them up, do you solve that problem? No, you actually don't. The problem is, well, what is the role of the platform to be able to kick you off? And if you are kicking people off, if you're modifying their content, if you are, suspending them unfairly, is that a violation of free speech? I think it is. And, that really is where government aggressively needs to step in. So government right now is kind of just it's like whack-a-mole, right? Everyone's trying to chase a different path. The irony is that no one is actually chasing this path, which is to say, these are monopolies by definition. Name of the book, name of the show. They're monopolies. How can we better regulate the operation of the monopoly? And you got to look at these two things: matchmaking and what we call rules and standards, right? So how do you curate usage on the platform or curate access to two mechanisms there? Talk a lot about it in the book. And, the last note I'll finish on is, in general, these content platforms have gotten way too restrictive, way too aggressive with that rules and standards, with that curation of usage on the platform, to some degree that you could probably call them fascist, which is just such an unfortunate irony in so many ways. But this is why. This is now YouTube's latest announcement that you can't talk about the 2020 election being fraudulent, right? If you talk about this, not only could it go down, not only could your videos be taken down, but your account could be threatened. You could be, deplatformed and all these kinds of things. This is not the value prop of platforms. It's not what they're supposed to stand for, right? The platform is not supposed to regulate speech in the way that these companies are. And Section 230, does not give them the protection to do that. The irony with removing 230, which we spoke about on the last episode, is that it could actually force more aggressive curation of free speech on the platforms, because now the platforms are liable for what is said on the platform. it's really tough to get a silver bullet here, on what to do, again, when so many in government don't understand how these things work, except for the EU seems to kind of be on the right track here. But the US is just so far away that it's kind of like, just a very blunt approach. It's just like, yeah, let's just try and hurt the platforms and deal with the consequences later. Yeah, let's kill 230. Yeah, let's break them up. They still are monopolies, and you're still not actually solving. You're hurting the business, right? You will absolutely hurt the tech monopolies if either of those things come to fruition. But there will be a bunch of unintended consequences. There are ways to do this with a lot less collateral damage. This being rein in the over-aggressive, unprecedented, violation of our civil liberties that these tech monopolies are infringing upon, without just kind of scorched earth laying waste and damaging the rest of the tech community that is trying to compete against these platforms. And we are seeing ways like a Rumble and other places that are creating alternatives to these content platforms that are particularly in question. We are seeing ways that product marketplaces are competing with Amazon and having success. There needs to be a role for government in this, but unfortunately, the government has not, whether it's the executive branch, the judicial branch, the Department of Justice, they just really haven't been able to figure out how to thread the needle. They clearly don't watch the show well enough. Otherwise, we'd be well on our way here. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.